Welcome back to r/LegalAdvice, where people ask questions, get advice, and we get satisfaction. If you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, Lake HOA wants $420,000 for lake repairs. I have questions and concerns. Hello everyone, I have an impending issue with an HOA that I need some advice on from people with legal expertise, so here I am. This is not an HOA hate threat, please don't turn it into one. I purchased a house in South Carolina in 2016 that has lakefront access. The property is part of an HOA in place for the safeguarding and upkeep of the lake. The costs are reasonable, $85 yearly, and there appears to only be 35 homes in it, those around the lake itself. In October 2015, SC was very hard hit by flooding and very many lakes with earthen dams washed out completely. The lake in this neighborhood was one of the few that survived intact. However, earlier this year the road crossing the bottom end of the lake where the dam is located was closed and the lake drained. This past week I received a letter from the HOA explaining that the board of directors for the HOA has spent the last 6 months working on restoration and massive improvements to the lake and neighborhood. They claim to have met with state agencies, DOT and DHEC and other interest groups to assess the damages to the lake and help to refurbish the dam to restore the neighborhood. The projected cost is $420,000. Then it goes on to list that they have 2 options that will likely guarantee the process of restoration: a one-time payment of $12,000 prior to the beginning of construction, or a down payment of $500 through a disaster assistance program and yearly payment of $500 for 30 years. This is to be signed under whichever option is chosen and returned by September 20th, and then a meeting will be held on September 21st to answer any questions and clarify. While I'm not against putting forth money toward this project because it is assumed to be part of the legal responsibility as a member of the HOA, a few problems with this that I see up front are: there has been no contact notification or publicly announced meetings held by the HOA prior to this. The listed options don't detail at all how they plan to repair the lake, only payment. They are requesting what is likely a legally binding signature sight unseen and without any discussion. The meeting to clarify and explain is not being held until after the given deadline. There's no assurance that the cost is not actually higher, which we would be expected to pay. What I am seeking advice on is wanting to know a few things. First, can I simply refuse to sign it until after the meeting on September 21st? Number 2, what questions do I need to ask in the meeting on September 21st to get the information I need to make an informed decision? How do I get assurances that they won't come back in a few months wanting even more money? Has the HOA legally failed to give proper notification and representation with regards to this issue? How can I force them to do their due diligence? What recourses do I have? Who knows what else I need to know? Help! Edit for updated information. Just wanted to add that other neighborhoods in the area have had to do something similar to get their lakes repaired after the 2015 flood. I read of one neighborhood in SC requesting that their county hold a vote to help them get a loan paid back by a self-imposed tax. This is not unheard of, I'm just concerned about the lack of information. And a user in the comments said, find your HOA charter and see what it says about board actions and whether they can conduct that kind of business without informing residents. Would I sign anything like what you are describing? Hell no. I would demand a lot of answers first, plus access to all supporting documents, because saying, you need to pay $12,000 without a lot of justification sends up all sorts of red flags. And another user in the comments said, hydrologist here, I'm not in a good position at the moment to research South Carolina water law. But still, which lake was it? Depending on the lake and dam, the Army COE might be involved as well. A state or federal dam repair should not require local homeowners to directly contribute towards the cost. State bonds for funding, sure, but not writing the government a check to pay the contractors. If the road was public, same thing. If private, then yeah, The HOA is paying for road repaving and regraveling, etc. I am unaware of any way to privately dam a river to make a lake on this sort of scale. You would start running into navigable water, floodplain and fishing restrictions well before you got to something that can provide frontage for 35 lots. Granted, the dam might have been grandfathered in, but doubtful since they are looking at rebuilding. As to the HOA notices, go read the charter and your house documentation very carefully. Reading this, it sounds extremely suspicious that they are having a meeting the day after they want your money. Call your HOA board, and if they dodge you, call the SC DNR. You should be able to get a contact name from your HOA board. I would also expect a mandatory period for public comment with a project this size. And yay, environmental impact statements. Now that I think about it, that public meeting could be the same one the HOA is advertising, so again, hold off on signing anything until you get more info. And guys, in general, not even when it comes to HOAs, you should always hold off on signing something before you have more information and can make an informed decision. Have you guys ever signed a contract and regretted it later on? Because maybe you were too lazy to actually read the contract? Let us know in the comments if you have any good examples. Update to the HOA lake story. I have spoken with the group of neighbors immediately surrounding me. None of us are signing it until we get answers. We intend to ask lots of questions at the meeting, such as why we haven't heard anything about this until they wanted money from us. Some of the neighbors are not even sure who runs the HOA or how to contact them. The letter we all received has no contact information, only the name of the sender and PO box as a return address. I have quite a number of questions that I will be asking at the meeting. I also want a copy of the bylaw so I can make sure everything they are doing is legit. Some of these are things that you guys have mentioned and others are things we have thought of in our neighborly discussions. I encourage anyone commenting to please suggest other questions to ask at the meeting if they feel I have missed anything. It is most appreciated. And a user in the comments said, how is it that none of you know who the HOA board is? You should have regular meetings and annual elections to the board. Or is it the other neighbors who are uninformed and you know? If nobody knows who is on the board, where and when the meetings are held, then anyone could just come along and pretend to be the HOA treasurer and collect a bunch of money before skipping town, aside from the very good questions about how the contractor was selected, whether they have sufficient liability insurance, etc. Seriously, another person said, with the amount of money they are asking for, all the residents seriously need to consider consulting an attorney for legalities of all this. You cannot trust the HOA to have your best interests in mind. Seriously, pool some money together and get an initial consult with a few attorneys who are knowledgeable with HOAs and expenditures of this magnitude. I cannot stress this enough. You cannot assume or trust the HOA to be looking out for your best interest as a homeowner. Although guys, according to my knowledge, usually HOAs should be acting in the best interest of the homeowners, but obviously, as the guy in the comments said, you definitely cannot always trust them. And by the way, if you have watched until here and enjoy legal advice or HOA stories, then please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments. This helps my channel tremendously. Thank you so much, it is very much appreciated. Another update to the HOA lake story. First off, I would like to thank everyone who commented with good questions and suggestions. Because of you, I was highly prepared for the meeting and I think some of what was asked will even help the HOA as they move forward with the project. There were nearly 30 homeowners at the meeting, including the HOA board. We got a lot of answers, but there are many things that will be a while before we really know anything, including the true cost. The project is currently at the stage where an engineer is drawing up the plan to be submitted to DHEC for permitting approval. The number figure they gave was the engineer's best guess based on the other lake/dam repairs he's been involved with. The purpose of the letter was to determine whether or not the homeowners wanted to pay in lump sum or borrow the money. We have elected to borrow the money. We won't be simply borrowing the money either, we will be petitioning the county to set up a special tax district for the houses surrounding the lake and assess ourselves additional property tax. The money from that additional tax will then be put into an account with HOA control and used to repay the loan. Having that tax in place provides numerous benefits. It leverages the county in the collection of the money versus depending on the HOA to collect it themselves. With a secure budget in place, lenders will be willing to actually loan us the money. Other benefits include the STD being public and therefore open to public scrutiny. This means everything from the details of the tax to the accounting to the execution of the work will be subject to review. Finally, the HOA did not drain the lake, the DHEC did. Sinkholes formed along the dam and road which triggered SCDOT closing the road and the lake level being lowered with a controlled drain to prevent flooding the businesses and homes below the lake. The dam and spillway have sustained enough damage that water was seeping into the surrounding soil and causing it to erode and wash away from around the culvert passing underneath the road. Even though the lake has been lowered, anytime it rains a significant amount, the water level rises enough to erode the soil further. It is enough of a hazard that without repairs, DHEC has threatened to seize the lake and permanently destroy it to protect the public. The homeowners would then be sent a bill by DHEC to cover the expense of destroying the lake, so there's no escaping significant cost. We are effectively backed up against a wall, and with Hurricane Florence, DHEC is now applying even more pressure to get this done. The engineer feels that our discussion and decisions in the meeting tonight will be sufficient for DHEC to back off and give us time to put that plan into action. So here we are. It is not optimal because, when is it ever, we will hear more once the plan is drawn up and meetings will be held to discuss the progress. The HOA apologized for not communicating with us sooner, citing that they really had nothing solid to communicate. At that time everything was up in the air, though I really felt it would have been prudent to have just held a meeting to discuss what was happening, or at least a letter. They have promised to do better in the future and were encouraged by the number of homeowners that showed up. And guys, I gotta say, I've tried my best to do more research in regards to this story, and I also contacted the OP, however he hasn't responded yet, so I can only go by what I have seen in the threads surrounding this topic. Judging by what I have seen in the comments and also by comments the OP made in other threads, it seemed that in the end the homeowners agreed to help the HOA pay for the repairs. However, in some way, which I did not really understand to be quite honest with you, the county was also involved in paying for this. So in the end, that sum of $420,000 was definitely not solely covered by the homeowners. But then again, once I get more precise information, I will update you. And the next one is titled, "My neighbor is asking for compensation after I cut down my apple tree." On Monday, I cut down an apple tree that has been on the property I own since the 1950s. The apple tree sat 5 feet back from my property line on either side, but did hang over into my neighbor's property. On Friday, my neighbor behind me came out yelling and complaining that I have ruined his home property value by cutting down the tree. He also demanded that I pay him for cutting down the tree because apparently the tree was one of the reasons he bought his house. He also said that he will be missing out on the fruit now that it is gone. I figured I could ignore him, but tonight I came home to a letter demanding that I compensate my neighbor for the tree. It was my damn tree that was deceased and my neighbor wants me to pay him. Can he really do that, or is he just blowing smoke? Edit, I went over this morning and spoke with my neighbor's wife. She was a bit nicer than her husband. I explained to her that the tree was deceased and needed to come down, but that I had plans to plant a new apple tree and possibly a peach tree as well. I also notified her that the other tree on my property, a very large red cheddar tree, will be cut down early in January. She said her husband will probably be upset by this as well, but she understands the tree is a danger to my home. And a user in the comments said, "So you cut down your tree on your property and your neighbor wants you to pay him? You have a couple of options here." Number 1. Just throw the letter in the bin and ignore your neighbor. Number 2. Be immature and petty like I would and send a counter demand to your neighbor demanding payment for X years worth of apples he did not pay for and for reducing your property values because your property is next to a complete moron. If you receive a letter from an actual lawyer and or court documents, you're going to need to take them seriously. But my advice for the time being is to treat this letter like the joke that it is. And the next one is actually technically an update to the crazy neighbor story, and it is titled, "My town is refusing to enforce the law on people who are poor." I posted here a while ago about my millennial hating neighbor and I back with a new issue from this guy. And this one also involves my town council as well. At the beginning of the year, my neighbor decided to rent his detached garage to a woman and her boyfriend. A few weeks after they moved in, there started to be problems. The renters started screaming and fighting, collecting junk outside their dwelling, including lots of trash, letting their dog dig into my yard and trespassing on my property, to name a few things. I have called my county's animal control every time I had an issue with their dog and called the police every time I had an issue with my neighbor. I have cameras up and have footage of all of the crap that they have pulled. I have asked the renters to stop, I have attempted to talk to my neighbor and with no avail. In an attempt to get these jerks gone, I spoke to my county's code enforcement because garages are not allowed to be dwellings in my county. Unfortunately, I live in city limits and so it falls to my city for jurisdiction. They also have the same law, but they have decided to not enforce this law because the renters are poor and are on disability and could sue the city for kicking them out. Actual words from a person I spoke to in my town hall. I have spoken with another person who works in my town as a cop, and not enforcing the law on poor people is becoming the norm in my town. Anything from speeding to theft is not enforced if you claim that it was done because you are poor. Unfortunately, the crime rate in my town has skyrocketed in the last year while the town's resident number has not increased. But more and more poor people seem to be committing crimes. I get that the city has some ability to use discretion in matters like this, but can they just decide to not enforce the law on a certain group of people? And a user in the comments said, maybe try the fire department. Does the garage have two means of egress, front and back door, or a large enough window that someone could exit through the window? Does it have a kitchen and electricity? If no kitchen, are they using space heaters and hot plates? If there's a kitchen, is all of that up to code? This could be a fire hazard, and generally fire marshals don't F around when people are blatantly creating a fire hazard. And another person in the comments said, as others have said, it doesn't matter if you qualify for Section 8 because it can literally take more than a decade to get access to it. The resources are stretched far too thin, so a lot of people are living on the verge of homelessness, even people who are disabled and literally unable to support themselves. By not enforcing fines, the city is actually trying to help vulnerable people avoid losing what little they have. Perhaps perspective can help you see the good in what they are doing, even if the outcome is not always favorable or fair. More resources are needed for better outcomes. That said, you also have rights. Being poor does not entitle a person to do as they please with no regard for others or the law. The city must maintain a delicate balance. You can impact the situation by reporting crimes, becoming actively involved in local government, getting to know your neighbors and establishing rapport and/or moving. And you know guys, interestingly enough, the argument of we don't enforce the law because people are too poor to pay the fine is actually something that I've also heard about in Thailand. As an example, a lot of people here ride motorcycles without a helmet, which is actually illegal, but supposedly a lot of police turn a blind eye to that because the people who don't wear a helmet are generally poor, or in other cases they are just stupid, but let's keep that aside, and then the police officers think that if they find them, they cannot pay anyway, so they just don't try it at all. And the last one is another update to the "my town is refusing to enforce the law on people who are poor" story. But first I will clarify some things. Number 1, this is not a race issue, my town is over 95% white, I am actually a minority, this issue is about my police force and town not wanting to be mean on people who are poor and breaking the law. Number 2, I have no idea why my neighbors like to be in my yard, I have nothing in my yard and haven't since November, other than a doghouse, rocks and wood rounds. No fruit trees, pools, playgrounds or toys. My guess is that they, especially the woman, lack boundaries. Number 3, the pattern I see is that people who live in a legitimate house, regardless of if they own or rent, are ignored when someone damages their property. My neighbor had her car window smashed even with security footage and the kid bragging about what he did. The police refused to do anything because his parents are poor. They live in a trailer park. Now for the update. I went and spoke with my town's mayor, he understood where I was coming from and I have a date to address my city council with the issue that I am having with the police department and the city's current stance on enforcing the laws. I was also informed that the state of Oregon passed a law requiring almost all towns and counties to allow additional dwelling units, ADUs. My mayor has asked me to help lead a committee to make my town's laws favorable to all parties as they try to come into compliance. As for my neighbors, the renters, well, they are in some hot water. A few days after I made my post, my friend, who is a mandatory reporter, was house sitting for me. She witnessed the renter's boyfriend beat one of the grandkids with a belt. She called DHS and the police. The police did nothing and DHS took the report. The police not doing anything, they did not even show up, pissed my friend off. My friend talked with an individual from the state's police who they know from work. They let them know something is seriously off about the renters and that the local PD doesn't want to deal with it. Well, over a week ago I witnessed a guy shooting up while the crazy neighbor lady talked to him. I called my county's drug task force and reported it. 2 days later, the county raided the dwelling and arrested the neighbors, the renters, the daughter and another person, all for dealing drugs. The kids were taken into protective custody and me and a few other people were questioned about everything. And guys, unfortunately, we have already reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and if you haven't already, please also go to patreon.com/ripeyoutube, where I upload exclusive Reddit videos starting at just $3 a month. This is a great way to support me in case you are interested, and the chance for me to become independent from YouTube revenue. Thank you so much for watching, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.